you don't actually feel a connection with the divine, with God, with the larger, fabric of life in some way, then how can you really be making choices and living your life from a state of unity rather than disconnection and separation? So what really needs to happen with most people is that they need to, with basically everybody, is that people need to erase that line of separation from their presentation self versus the deeper, darker truth of their being, and start merging the two, so that one's presentation self, the person that you're actually being when you walk out of your house and go relate with people and do your job and go to school and have your business meetings or whatever, that presentation of your being is more in line with the truth of your being, rather than living life from a place of separating out the parts of yourself that you deem as not being acceptable and shoving them away into the subconscious, and then creating a false image of yourself which you seek to conform to as much as you can. Instead, then, I think that people need to start exploring their beings a lot more, giving themselves the freedom to figure out what is the truth of their being. What does that really mean? What's genuinely going on inside one's consciousness? At the most extreme examples, what is going on in Bill Cosby and other people who do terrible things like this that is propelling him to do such horrible, terrible things to women? Why is that a expression of the truth of his being? What's the motivation within his subconscious? And walk it back from such extreme examples as that, just to what is going on within most of ourselves, that to some extent or other is not deemed as being acceptable to society, that we feel we need to hide. And how can we start getting more in touch with those aspects of ourselves, getting more acquainted with them, coming to greater understanding of them, and figuring out how to transform and evolve those deeper aspects of the self? Because that's what it comes down to, is we don't need better presentations of our beings. We don't need a glossier looking facade, a nicer looking self. We need to genuinely get in touch with, transmute, and transform the truth of our being at those deeper levels that is truly driving us to make the decisions that we make in our lives. Getting back to the title here, rather than how does an enlightened person live their life, what is the reality of your soul, and how can you figure out what that reality is and get more in touch with it? And that then opens you up to a much greater freedom of being. One thing to keep in mind here is that, yes, the whole universe is perfect. It isn't that Jesus was a perfect being versus all the rest of us. The universe is perfect as it is. Nothing would have happened if not for a reason that caused it to happen. It is all part of a learning process. The idea was not for the universe to progress in a specific way, and then somehow it got off track and then resulted in these screwed up human beings who do all these terrible things. But it's all an experiment and a learning process. And so everything is acceptable. Everything that happens. Bill Cosby's behavior, of course, his actions are unacceptable. But within the larger concept, the larger, the bigger picture, then it is all allowed as a necessary part of the learning experience. You can't draw any kind of a neat line saying, on the other side of this specific line are all the unacceptable bad things, and then on this side of the line are all the acceptable okay things. We all, there's a huge gray area. We all do things and then afterwards think, well, maybe I should have held the door open for that person and not been selfish because I'm kind of in a little bit of a hurry. I could have waited 5 seconds. We have little things going on all throughout our day in which, well, maybe you could have done this differently, or maybe I shouldn't have held the door open for that person because I was just acting out of guilt and doing what I felt like I should have done, when I really just, the truth of my being was I just wanted to keep on going because I'm late for this meeting, and that person has, full capability to open the door for themselves. Just a tiny little example that the kind of thing that comes up in our lives regularly to make the point that it isn't about right or wrong. It isn't there isn't a right answer as to whether you should have held the door open for that person or not. We're not gonna get it all exactly right throughout our lives, and that's not the point. So rather to open things up and allow that flexibility, that freedom within the context of your life to find out who you really are, to be as honest as you can, and to allow that sort of a frame of being to lead you in your life to ultimately connect with deeper layers of your being, and to understand that opening things up like that is most likely going to lead to some shadow aspects of the self. And so this is what shadow work is all about. And to then allow those shadow aspects of the self to be embraced within the context of who you really are, and to understand that isn't proof that you're a bad person, that I have figured out that I'm angry at my dad for whatever reason, or to have a realization about something you did in your past in which you thought that you had done the right thing, and then you realize you did the totally wrong thing and really hurt someone as a result, when all this time you've been in a state of self-righteous justification about it, and then finally you realize, holy crap, I totally screwed up. That doesn't mean that you are a bad person. That is just a realization that you made one of those choices in which another choice could have been, had a better outcome. And so to release the judgment against oneself and understand and recognize that everyone has a shadow side. Nobody on earth is a completely open book. There's just no way to genuinely be that way within our current societies. And so to live one's life rather from a state of follow your intuition, follow one's desires, be who you want to be, rather than, for example, thinking, well, an enlightened person, wouldn't care what they look like because they're enlightened, and what does it matter what other people think of them? This falls into that constrictive state of being of I should be this or that. Do you care what you look like? How you appear to others? Some people clearly don't, have that much concern in that department based on how they present themselves. But that doesn't mean that they're right. There isn't a right answer. But what feels right to you? Do you prefer to walk out in the world, dressed a certain way and conducting yourself in a certain way? And then just be aware of what is the motivation beneath that. Is that coming from a place of inspiration, of creativity, of expressing your passion for life? Or is that about trying to hide some part of yourself and getting your hair exactly perfect and getting your shaving your beard exactly perfect because you don't want to allow the slightest little bit of imperfection to be shown to the world? What is your real motivation for doing the things that you do in your life on a sort of microcosmic scale of just becoming more self-aware, more conscious of what is going on within one's consciousness? And that intention is a tremendous guide in one's life to going deeper within and to finding those aspects of the self that are motivating us to live our lives in certain ways, so that one can then get in touch with those parts of the self, come to understand them better, and ultimately transmute and transform them so that we can start operating our lives and living from a place of greater consciousness of our being at deeper levels, rather than structuring our lives to such a great extent around avoidance of the truth of our beings, around avoiding fears within, around avoiding those parts of ourselves that we deem unacceptable, and stuff like this.